How exciting.
It is exciting. So, welcome everyone. My name is Jared. I'm one of the team members at Podcast Movement, and I'm excited today because joining me is the lovely Elsie Escobar. Most people who stick around podcasting are probably familiar with Elsie, or at least they should be. Elsie is with Libsyn, of course, and she's the co-host of the feed, and she podcasts and just is a remarkable human. So, we're thrilled today to be able to hang out with her. So, hi, Elsie. How are you?
I'm well. How are you doing? I hear little sniffles.
Yeah, I've got the first vaccine in me and a little side effect going on, but that would not prevent me from hanging out with Elsie Escobar. Let the
Oh, you're
record
so
reflect
kind.
that. So, so we're hanging out today, and why not? If we're gonna hang out, may as well talk about community building tips.
Yeah, absolutely. As I was preparing for this is a conversation that keeps on coming up all the time. I think from so many different perspectives, and I think this last year, 2020, at least for me, brought to a head a lot of very poignant, I think, conversations and situations as a community leader that were already there, but so many more things like kind of came into a head, and I started to realize where we had come together, like as community leaders, like especially leading something like a Facebook group, and how important it is to be at the helm of these places, and how much responsibility you have. that
I
you
can
didn't,
laugh at that, yes, because
you know what I mean? That you didn't really know that
right.
you had somehow. And so I think I kind of broke down this conversation, and with a little bit of tips and a little bit of sort of really high level topics that are around. The first one is going to be around responsibility. The second one is culture. And the third one is investment. And I think when we start to talk about these three levels, it becomes a little bit more clear as to whether or not, folks really want to step into being a community manager or community leader or community advocate, because it entails in a lot more things that oftentimes we don't really pay attention to. What do you think about that, Jared?
Well, I think of it from two standpoints, because one is the podcast movement hat, but then the other one is as a podcaster myself,
Right.
I'm thinking about it from that standpoint too. Is like, how do I foster these people that are gracious enough to listen to what I'm doing on a podcast versus a community like Podcast Movement. So there's
Right.
different ways that I'm kind of processing that. So yeah, this should be fun to jump in
Yeah.
and
And
explore.
I'm so open to, answering any questions if anybody has any at any point. It would be really awesome. I am getting so much like static. I can feel my static. I think it's my hair. I think in my ears it's like going but anyway, if it does not bothering anybody else, or you can't hear it, it's cool. But I'm like, what is that crackling in my ears? So starting off with actually one of the things that I sent, some of the notes that I sent to Jared was like the responsibility aspect of it, and I put like in parentheses, congratulations, you're a parent.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because it sort of feels like that you don't really actually know that you're doing that. And I think you and I, Jared, when we, and Dan, when we all started to kind of drive the mission between a Facebook group specifically, or starting to getting them together, it was sort of like a different world. And the reason I say congratulations, you're a parent, it's because there came a point when we stepped into that relationship with one idea, and then it sort of became something else. And it all of a sudden you realize, oh, I'm the boss. Oh, I'm the parent. Oh, I'm the one that has to be the one that controls all of this and teaches and figures out what the rules are and what are the boundaries. And it was like a backwards thing. Or am I misspeaking that you started, when you all started Podcast Movement, did you realize that this is what you were getting into?
I didn't. I think we had done a little bit of Facebook group stuff for other things, but nothing on the scale of what it of the Podcast Movement community. And then when that started in 2014, that kind of,
Yep.
I'm sure just like She Podcast, it was just like a lot of excitement and a lot of things were happening quickly. So it was what I call baptism by the fire, is just like
Yeah.
being thrown in the deep end, and exactly what you're saying. It's like, okay, I'm responsible for this. So um, that it was a lot of learning as we go, and probably a lot of mistakes that we didn't know were mistakes. And okay,
Mm-hmm.
now we have to set up some type of boundaries, which that felt kind of like, I don't want to try to prevent people from being able to have a voice, or but then you realize, okay, I need to, in order to protect the overall community, you need to have some guidelines in
Yeah.
place, and what are those, what's fair, what's reasonable. How do you show courtesy to someone who's new and honestly just makes a mistake and breaks a rule, versus someone who's just trying to take advantage? So you kind of learn what those are, and I still don't always get them right, Elsie. I'd love to pretend I do, but I don't.
Right.
Um, so it
No.
is sometimes, and there's been times I've had to write somebody wrote to me and, hey, this post got deleted. I'm trying to understand why. And then we had to have a
Mhm.
little chat about what happened, and then figure it out. Okay, well, this is how we interpreted it. But then we realized, okay, it was supposed to be, this other thing. And then, okay, how do we, repost this so that it makes sure nobody's, incorrectly misunderstanding or whatever. So
Right.
there's all sorts of little things that happen, and now it's happening more often than it ever has. And
Yeah.
thankfully, I've got a little more experience under my belt to deal with it. But
Yeah.
yeah, you're right. It is there are responsibilities with it, and it is something that hopefully people can take on and be gracious about, because some people, everybody's different, and
Mhm.
what makes sense to one person might have to be explained to another, and you
Yep.
just kind of have to realize that's part of it, and that's the joy of getting to know your community, and if you embrace it and look at it that way, I think that's going to take you a little further than if you just um, dismiss it. So
Oh yeah. And
yeah.
all in all, I think as one of the biggest tips that I can share, as Jared is speaking into, is that part of the process, particularly when you start to deal with something that starts to scale pretty quickly, because one thing that the that Facebook does incredibly well, as you know, is their algorithm. And
Mhm.
usually that algorithm is reflective of the things that they want to do, the things that they want to grow. So you, as a Facebook group owner, you can maybe make it private and have them go through a lot of different hoops, or maybe you're having a Facebook group that is specific to maybe your podcast community, and they have to go through a different place to get access to your group, in which way, then it becomes a little bit easier to manage. But if you decide to just create a Facebook group and just have it be on Facebook, Facebook is going to really grow it for you, which is a wonderful thing, because the algorithms that are set for Facebook are there just to grow, because they want people to be inside of Facebook. But in doing so, you don't have any control over what that looks like. So sometimes what tends to happen, and I don't know if you've experienced this as well, and this is why I'm going back to the responsibility aspect of it, as we stick to it and being really mindful about that this is really your place, and it's not an excuse to not know, is that there are some folks that are going to start to be inside of your group that have no idea who you are.
Yep.
Have you had that happen before, Jared? Where you're
All the
like,
time. Yeah,
"Hey,
all the
I'm
time.
Jared. I mean, Jared,
Yeah,
Jared,"
I don't even
and
try to play that game anymore. just,
just like,
I assume they don't know me, and that,
yeah,
and
right?
then yeah, my ego is not bruised. So
It's because you don't know, and it
yeah.
literally is like you go in there and you're like posting, and people are like, who is the who are these people?" Or you post something, and or they're like, "Who owns this place?" It's like, it's us, don't you know? And it becomes really a challenge, because it kind of grows on its own. And part of that responsibility is that you have to, and I'm only bringing parenting into this because obviously I'm living it on a day to day, and I realize
Mhm.
that the structures that I have to remind at least my children is like, you have to do these things every time you wake up, like make your bed, change your clothes out of,
Yeah.
being in PJs all day. Like, all of those different things you have to remind. And it's the same sort of thing inside of the responsibility that you have on the Facebook group, is that there is no like, oh, they should know already. That doesn't work inside of a group that continues to grow in a way that doesn't recognize who you are, not from an ego perspective but a historical perspective, where they don't really have that one-on-one understanding of where this group came from, why they're there. And I think podcast movement has been doing a really great job. Haven't you all been doing those welcome? Don't you have a welcome, like a monthly
Um,
welcome thing now?
Yeah, we try to do, and this is not something that we've done all along. It's something
Right.
we've recently started just
Exactly.
because we're
Yep.
still learning, like you said. But we do a new member welcome, and we try to invite people, and we try to put it at a time that we think will work across the board, not just our own time zone, but okay, because now there's people that are international. There's people that
Mhm.
might be tuning in from India or from Australia or from Europe or wherever. So we try to pick a time that we think is fair, and we don't always get that right. And then people will join in, and then we give them hopefully a chance to get on stage and introduce themselves, tell a little bit about their show or their idea. And so it's a nice way to interact with some. You can't interact if you're getting a lot of people. You can't interact with all of them, but you can interact
Right.
with some of them, and that's been fun. We've enjoyed getting to know some of the community, some of the new community members, just from them being a part of that new member welcome.
Yeah. I think
Hmm.
that that's a wonderful thing to do in order for you to always touch base, like as somebody that's going in there and saying like, hey, this is what this is about. And it's an
Hmm.
opportunity for you to talk about the brand as a whole, right? Who the owners are. And again, not coming from a place of like ego, not like, hey, you should know who I am, but simply like where you are. This is the house, and these are the things that we do. And I really love yellow and green. You know what I mean? You know what I mean? And then people would go like,
Yes.
"Oh, good. Okay, so we're in the yellow and green place. I get it. Okay, neat." And so it gives an opportunity for folks to really get to know each other that way as well and feel welcome. So those are some things I think when you step into creating a Facebook group, to understand that responsibility that you have when you start these groups from the get-go. And so if I were to give you like one big piece of advice for those of you who are listening and who want to build some of this, is the fact that you need to look at it from the perspective of, once you give this birth, right? When this is created, then it really is your responsibility to nurture it and to guide it. And to also, and this has not happened for us, but I have seen it to happen to some of the people that I've worked with in the past, or communities that I've been a part of in the past, where there comes an end to that conversation, right? Where you recognize that the group no longer is reflective of why you started it. And there is really no reason for you to have to push it forward if it's no longer feeding you, whether it's personally or feeding your business or feeding your podcast or the community, or if it's starting to show you that there's a lot more like in your everyday behavior. If that group is sucking the life out of you, it's probably the time for you to let it go. But if it's not, then you can adjust based on how you want it to continue to nurture it so that it continues to grow. Yeah.
Yes, and there have been moments where I have felt exactly like you were just describing, but walking away isn't necessarily the option that I have.
Right.
But what I can do is I can hopefully, and this might be, I hope this is a problem that podcasters start to run into, is they have an issue where now they have so much bandwidth and they can't maybe be available all the time in the Facebook
Mhm.
group, and that could be an opportunity where you could let some of the leaders in your group be moderators or be involved in some capacity where
Yeah.
they can help kind of take on some of that. And then that's kind of nice too, because then it's less about you and more about the community, and that's something that I think is always a great way to grow your groups, is not necessarily make it about you, but just make it
Oh, yeah.
about others, and that, when you empower some of those folks that are involved and want to be sharing and things, and they've kind of earned that trust, Elsie, that okay, I can I see Stacy over here. Stacy is someone that I
Mhm.
know is reliable, and she's not going to do anything outlandish or whatever. She can be a person that you could potentially ask if they want to be involved as a moderator or something. And then you have a couple more people that get to be involved and have a little role, so to speak. And it could be, hopefully it's a win-win where they get an opportunity to be recognized as a leader in the group, and then it's also giving you a little less responsibility. You're still got to be responsible, as Elsie pointed out, but you have some of the other people that are empowered around you and helping.
Oh my gosh, it is so good. And that, like, I think that really segues us into the cultural perspective, or like the other level, which I find that this was possibly, when we were talking about mistakes, or like we didn't do it so good from the beginning or so well from the beginning, I think the biggest mistake that we made when we started She Podcast, and I don't think it was like an actual mistake. I think it was just at that time, the groups weren't what they are now.
That's true.
There's been
They've evolved.
Yeah, it's like there's so much has changed. I think it's so much have changed that it didn't even exist at that time. But when we started under one specific desire, right? Our desire was to had a Facebook group for She Podcast, which was essentially where women podcasters gathered and talked about podcasting. Like, that's it. Like, there was really nothing more around that. And we were not thinking of leading like a movement, and more about more the feeling of like, going out to dinner with your friends. That's the feeling we wanted. So it was just like, it's like, we just finished going to New Media Expo at that time. And we had so many, dinners with our friends. And we were like, we want to have some of this. We want to take some of this. I really miss these women. How come we can't just hang out together? Let's create this group. So we started from that really small vision of just meeting each other, and then it grew really, really fast, and then it became like it's much harder to have an intimate sort of like everybody like hang out together sort of experience when it started to exponentially grow. And then we realized that we had never put there was no culture really that we ever called out around that. And when I say culture, I'm talking about sort of like the way in which you love to welcome people to your house, right? Like, if you're having folks for dinner, like, there are some things that you always want them to feel. And maybe for you, it's like you want them to feel like super pampered. Maybe you want them to feel super pampered. They're not there to do anything. Then you just want to like give them all the things. Or maybe you just really want them to have an experience of having like a gourmet dinner every time they come over. And that's very specific. And people start to feel like, oh yeah, whenever I go, to Jared's house, I always feel like this and this and this. And I love to go hang out over at his house because it makes me feel this way. And even though what we did do right is that Jess and I have a natural culture between us, and therefore people gravitated towards that. But we had to be very intentional as we grew to start to outline what that is in writing for the group, and say, this is the type of behavior, not in those terms, of course. We worked very hard at trying to have the best language that we possibly could. But it's like, it wasn't like, hey, this is the place where you do these things, and this is how you do it here. And we lead with, and for us, it's really about kindness and respect and fun. Like, there's lots of kindness and respect and fun for most of the things that we do for She Podcasts is all around that feeling. And that's where it started. But we didn't really start that way. And we found ourselves having to backpedal to sort of figure out, how do we teach that? Like, how do we let new people know how to do that? Because there was no mechanism already preset for that.
Is that because some of the initial founding members kind of inherently knew you and knew Jess, and they just kind of knew that's how it was?
Yes.
So you didn't really have to spell it out to them.
Exactly.
But then you have a new group coming in and they don't know.
Yeah. Did you feel that as well, Jared? Or was it a little like, Or
Yeah.
or was that not like sort of top of mind when you started?
Well, it's always it wasn't top of mind because a lot of it was like learning as you go. But
Yeah, yeah.
it's still today. There are people that will join a group specifically, or they might join the podcast movement group, and they have no idea what even podcast movement is.
Right.
They just think, okay,
Exactly.
here's a Facebook group with other podcasters, and so they don't know, okay, well, podcast movement's actually, we do a newsletter, or we have an event, or we have, these other
Uh-huh.
things. So they don't always know that. And so we're trying to find, unique and fun ways, like you shared, to kind of make sure people are aware of, the options that they have. Not just, hey, you're in just another group.
Right.
So, mhm.
Yeah, for sure. I know that for me, like in terms of that, that's when the leadership came into the scene. And I started to really recognize the power of having a mission and a vision and values. And it's something that I constantly keep bringing up for everybody whenever they're having a conversation around their podcast, or like whenever anybody asks me a very direct question like, Elsie, should I start a Facebook group? Or where should my community be? Or
Mm.
should I start an email newsletter? Or should I have two posts a week instead of one post a week on my podcast? And
Should I
it's
be
like,
on Clubhouse?
right,
Yeah.
exactly. Yeah, should I be on Clubhouse? Oh my God.
Right.
What I generally say to that is like, really look back at what's your mission?
Hmm.
What is your vision for your show? And what are your values? And are the choices that you're making reflective of what that is? And that's really going to start to allow you to make the best choices for you. I know for me, that was huge for us, for Jess and I, to sit down and really think about what are the things that we want to make sure folks know about She Podcasts. What are the important things that we want to do in the group? Because the group itself is not the whole entire brand, right? I don't know if you feel this way either, but like the podcast movement group is not necessarily reflective of the podcast movement conference,
Yeah,
right? I mean,
it's not, but it's
yeah,
not that we don't try to have elements of that. But yeah, it
right.
is. It's a different, platform. It's a different thing.
Yeah.
So,
And the
mhm.
feeling for us was different. And so we had to really cultivate what that was, which started to force us to say to folks, again, going back to this is what we believe. This is why we are here together. These are the reasons that you join our group. And
Mhm.
these are the things you can and cannot do. And that was actually reflective of the behavior inside the group. So they weren't like random things that somebody told us. It was really based on problems or pain points that we saw when folks were posting inside the group. And we really started to discern between each other, with Jess and I, saying like, is this okay? And sometimes whenever we would see a post, then one of us would like it and the other one wouldn't. And we were thinking like, okay, should we keep that up or should we take that down? Depending upon, we actually had a lot of dialogue between each other where we debated
Hmm.
and we got very specific as to what we liked or what she liked or what I liked, and how that would reflect on the larger group. And one of the key questions that also Jess really pushed towards me and made me have to really look back at this is that I lead a lot from my heart, and so I'm like, but they're so good, but they just want support, but they just, and so I'm constantly like, just let them do it. They need some help or whatever. And then she was like, well, if she would always go, think about it from this perspective. If you let this person post, we need to let all 20,000 of them post. Would you be okay with that same type of post? And then I was like, oh my God, I don't think so.
Yeah, that can create ripple
Yeah.
effects that are, yeah,
Yeah.
I get it. Yep.
Yeah. So then like I always sat back and I was like, okay, I don't know if I would want that. And so, because if we say yes to one, we have to say yes to all. And that's why, I mean, of that specific type of post. And it made me have to get very clear, if I say a yes, what kind of a yes is this?
Mhm.
And now thinking about mission and vision and values as a As She podcast, it's actually become different because now it's no longer Jess and Elsie. Now it's like, is it okay for She podcast? And it's like a third entity where sometimes I come in and I have personal investment in people, in brands, in whatever, right? That I have. And I will come in and I will pitch my partner. Is it okay if even stuff that I'm doing outside of She Podcast, I ask permission and I say, is it all right for me to post about this? And depending upon who it's benefiting, I have to follow the rules.
Yeah.
For us, if you're going to post about something specific from a larger brand, you essentially pay to play. So if you want access to that, it's part of a sponsorship deal. The end.
Yeah. Yeah.
Even if it's me. You know what I mean?
That's
And
fair.
it's like
Yep.
the end. That's it. Because we can't play favorites.
Yep. We've dealt with that as well. I want to back up just slightly. What, can you share specifically how you lay out kind of that welcome and for someone who's new, how they know what the expectations are in the She Podcast group?
Yeah, way back in the day, and we haven't updated it as of yet. And I think I shared that document with you way back in the day too. We actually created first a document inside of Facebook where we introduced ourselves, we outlined who we were, we outlined what it was, like really small, like nothing super in depth. And then we started to break down the things that we did every day that were reflective of what the community wanted. So as you know, and I think every podcaster knows, everybody also is so excited about their show. They're constantly wanting to share about their show because their show is like, amazing and they're so proud. And so instead of like just stopping that, we have what we call Win Bag Wednesday. And that was our first like weekly thing that tended to repeat. And we have like one post and everybody posts inside of Win Bag Wednesday. And there are no other podcast episode promotions after that. And we've outlined a few days that do that. So on Thursday, they pitch themselves to each other. So they pitch themselves to be on each other's shows, or they pitch somebody else to be on somebody's show. That's another day. And then we have Thrilling Thursday, which we started to do because there were so many people who were posting that they just launched their show. And it was getting a little overwhelming. It was like, I just posted my new, and we were like, yay. But it was like overrunning the entire thing. So now we have that one day where they do that. And so those are just some like of the larger parameters, because once we got those type of posts put in those days, then it was really set up. And then we have basic sort of conduct, right? An agreement that you agree not to, sell other products, that you agree. And this is something that's unique to She Podcasts, because our group doesn't really allow anyone who's not a podcaster or who doesn't want to be a podcaster. Whether or not people follow the rules, that's a little harder to really do. But our intention around this group is that everybody in the group is either a podcaster or will be podcasting.
Okay.
The end.
I can see how that your group specifically would attract people that want to, let's say, be a guest on podcasts, but don't necessarily want to create a podcast. So then, so that would be interesting to determine how do you differentiate, or how do you even know what the purpose is of the person that's joining.
That's right.
Yeah.
But that's the intention. And so we'll outline those things, and we often will ask questions around that. And the last thing that we do too is that there's a lot of business cross promotion. Like people are trying to sell their business, or, I just launched a new podcasting 101 course, stuff like that. And so what we've outlined in there is that because She Podcast is a business, there is a clause inside of the agreement that says, if you are posting these things, you can pay us essentially, right? So there's like a partnership deal where we will support you after we vet your work or whatever. But otherwise, we won't accept any posts that directly affect our bottom line, because it's a business, right? So that's outlined on there. And the way that people, but unfortunately, Jared, as you know, people don't read that.
Yeah, I do.
Even though like people come into the group and that's, you were supposed to agree to it. Like that's what we ask. Please go in here. And that's one of the questions. Do you agree to these groups and regulations? And then you're supposed to agree to all that stuff. And folks oftentimes don't do that. And that's a little chart. It's challenging.
So when they miss that because they didn't read it, we'll give them the benefit of the doubt and assume know it's not malicious or anything. How are you reaching out to them, and how does that process work?
Whenever some of the rules go down or like are not appropriate anymore, one of the things that I actually talked to Dan about this, because we were really worried about what would happen. We didn't know how it would impact us, was that we now have post approval. Before it was a little bit harder because we had to go inside of the posts and comment on people's posts or delete them. And then we had to reach them out to them. So now we have post approval. And in that post approval feedback, we will give that feedback to them. Yeah,
we got to a point where we had to turn that on for many years, probably 3 or 4 years. We didn't ever have to do that. But then it got to a point where scalability, we couldn't keep the parameters of the rules and keep the groups. I'm going to use the word safe. Just kind of make sure everything's in check without that option being turned on. So thankfully Facebook has that, and it helps. But that can get backlogged. I'm sure you've seen that, where you're just like, okay, everybody's busy and everybody has things going on. And then your pending post are adding up, and it's like, okay, I need to make sure, get these posts either approved or disapproved for whatever reason. So that, these people aren't like, hey, I posted, and then it was, a day later before it ever showed up.
And I know. And it's, I think part of that too, Jared, goes back to a different conversation that I think that we need to, I think that can actually go back. And this is something that we would address too, in terms of the culture and the rules, saying like, please, give us some grace. We are a small team. We run all of these things, but unfortunately we don't do things like immediately for you. And we're in a culture now, I think all the way around, where our expectations around response times are really, I'm not sure that they're the best, and I'm talking personally too. Like my expectation, and when I reach out to somebody, is like, you need to get back to me like right away. And if I expect people to treat me the way that I want to be treated, I have to also give them grace to be able to take care of their business. Right. I can't continually be like not triggered in the way that we're talking in social sometimes, but triggered as in like a response where I have to go deal with something when I'm dealing with it feels this very weird when you're like trying to teach your child or having a conversation with your significant other. And then you get a ping via Facebook and you're like, oh, hold on 1 second. I'm going to go respond to this person I don't know, who just run a Facebook group that I don't even know why they're so upset. You know what I mean? It just seems like this is the important thing here. This person here doesn't own you. Right. But it's a trigger. And I think that setting those boundaries is something I'm really adamant now to be able to set. You do not have access to me just because you're in my group. I mean, and again, I'm not saying that from an ego perspective. I'm saying that from the mental health. Like, I can't.
You're a mother. You have responsibilities outside of the group. Yeah.
Yep.
I get it.
Give me one moment, Jared. Speaking. Oh my God. I know they're asking for, y'all are going to have to wait till I'm finished. Okay. And I'll love you forever. And I will let you have yours tomorrow at 1:00. Okay.
That's right.
I promise.
So this is a good example on how to be an admin in your group.
I love you.
Is what Elsie's doing right here. So.
Oh crap. Did Daddy leave? Yes. Oh my God, Jared.
Yes.
Now you're gonna have to give you one moment. I have to go. You have to keep talking.
You are Elsie, and you can have
1 second.
Moment.
Oh my God.
No problem. So while we're waiting, I just want to say I think it's really cool that everybody's joining us, and whether you're watching on Facebook or YouTube, if you're watching right now, I'd love to hear where you're from. Love to give you a shout out while we're waiting for Elsie to come back. I see we got Mike Inglis that's hanging out with us. We got Andrew Wang, big fan of Andrew. Oh, there's Elsie. Elsie, are you back, or you still need a
I'm
minute?
back. And it's so
Okay.
funny because it's like, this is what we call boundaries because I've been taking their iPads away. We have decided no iPads all through the morning up to around 2:00.
Yep.
And it's tough. And so they're coming in here and I got a sign. And so
I
they're
love
like,
it.
I was supposed to have it. I'm not online. And they have a class they're supposed to be in right now.
Okay, fair enough.
And they're not.
We
I'm like,
encourage that.
oh, okay. In that respect, I'll leave my thing to allow you to go back in to do your things because, oh my God. So my apologies for that.
Oh no, you're
But
doing
this
great.
is this is what I'm talking about. What you just saw.
Yep.
That's the physical manifestation of us getting notifications with our Facebook groups.
I get it.
You know what I mean? So, yeah, for sure. Now, yes, Jared.
Okay, so I did have a question come up from one person in St. Paul, Minnesota. Is we're talking about Facebook, and I think we're going to keep the conversation on Facebook. But there is that thought of what other platforms outside of Facebook for community building. Is that something you want to maybe touch on for a moment?
Yeah, for sure. I can definitely do that. You know, part of something that we did actually is we also have the She Podcast Super Squad in the same way that you have Podcast Movement University, right?
Right.
So we have the She Podcast Super Squad, which is a membership or premium model where that's where they get access to us. That's where they get access to one-on-one conversations. That's where they get the majority of the Elsie and Jess time. We also have other experts in the same way that you have it for you. We have other experts that come in and we have all kinds of wonderful courses and like solutions to problems that keep on coming up. And they also get like percentages off of like the going into the She Podcast event. I mean, you know, all of those extra different things there. And it's been good, but you know, the inertia of Facebook is so hard, Jared. I think that I'm still trying to crack that in all honesty, because I wanted to sell it, you know, in our sales pitch, if you will, to join the Super Squad. My biggest driver was community outside of Facebook is what I wanted to sell. Like that was a dream scenario for me. That's like, we can be in this space. And the reality of the situation is their biggest value add for joining the Super Squad is access to us and access to our knowledge versus the community. And that was a hard truth that I had to I had to swallow it. And I had to be like, ugh, I haven't solved that problem yet. So there are other solutions, but you have to work so hard to move people out of their habits. I don't know if you found the same thing. At least for me, it's been a little bit of a challenge, or for us anyway.
Oh, no doubt. But that said, I think we're experiencing that there are a number of people that you know, right or wrong, they don't want anything to do with Facebook, and
yeah,
so
for sure.
So you're gonna have some folks that gravitate toward the other option for that reason, and then for us, we're just gonna say, okay, we're gonna have that option available and love on those folks and spend time with them as we have the bandwidth and the availability and then that's, you know, I don't pretend that we get it all right. We don't, but we're working at it. So what we've done, and this may be helpful to some people who are watching, is we've used a tool on a platform called Mighty Networks. And that's a really wonderful option because it has a mobile app as well. And so someone can interact on the mobile app just as easily as they could if they're just going into the inner circle or whatever you want to call this next level or this other tier for your community. And so we've used Mighty Networks, and there's a number of other wonderful options out there that you can look at, but that's the one that we're using. And we are getting people that are excited about that, and we're getting some of those folks that just aren't Facebook friend, you know, they don't want to do anything, want to do Facebook, and so that's kind of where they're going to be hanging out most likely. And so So the challenge, of course, with that is now you got you can't ignore Facebook, but you still need to show some love in this other tier. So yeah,
Yeah.
I'm still juggling and balancing that, and I'm
Yep.
getting a little better at it. But yeah, sometimes I'm like having to catch up and things, and it is what it is. But
Yep.
that's part of the fun of as your community grows, you get to determine how to how
Yep.
to adjust and pivot and
Oh my gosh.
continue to have fun with the folks that are excited about what's going on and want to be a part of it. So, um,
Absolutely.
but yeah, getting back into the Facebook group stuff, because I think Facebook is just such an important thing that you don't want to ignore because there are so many people still there. Um, you were sharing about how you've laid out your welcome and then kind of the guidelines, and then there are moments when some people aren't able to, they've missed it or they
Mhm.
deliberately didn't read it or whatever. So once they're in, and then you've got the pending post turned on,
Mhm.
so you can discern if this is something you're going to allow or not.
Yep.
And so can you maybe walk me through a specific example of where a post you decided, okay, no, we're not going to let this go, and how that conversation played out for you, and so just so people have an idea as they potentially run into that in the future.
Yeah, one of one of the great things, not enough of that Facebook does have are those little rules, because
Mm-hmm.
it's weird. We have our document, which is really long, and that document is outside of it's like an agreement, an agreement to engage in this group, and it's separate. And then Facebook offers up to 9, I believe, group rules that you can add inside there, and you outline them all in there.
Mm-hmm.
And for the majority of the posts in there, they fall under one of these 9 that are outlined.
Okay.
And so whenever we do that, you can decline and give feedback. And so when you decline and give feedback, you can type in the exact thing, or you can just pick on the whatever the rule broken was.
Right.
One of the biggest ones that we are really strong proponents in, and that requires a ton of leadership and has moved into this space through the years with She Podcasts. And it's the one that we get challenged on the most, but it's the one that we really stand by, is that She Podcast is for women and non-binary. So whenever you post anything in She Podcasts, you use gender neutral language when you post anything. So you don't do hi guys, you don't do hey ladies. So you just don't. We are gender neutral language. And everybody's like, but it's She Podcast. We get it. We've addressed this many different times. We've done that because the spirit of the group was created so that we can amplify the voices that often are not heard. And in that spirit, as we have known with She Podcast, it has expanded to include non-binary, gender-neutral folks that want to join our group. That is totally all right. It's totally okay. And in order for us to serve everybody, we use hey guys. Hey folks, what's up, y'all? Things like that are
Yeah.
gender neutral. So we do have a rule. And then when people post and they say like, hey ladies, I don't know what artwork I need to pick or whatever, then there's a little thing. And you just say like you decline because of, use gender neutral language. We have little tiny examples of what to do, and off it goes. Just edit it and then come back and do it. And that's it. Super easy. Do we get pushback? Sometimes we get less pushback with those than we do with things that are kind of self-promoty.
Yeah.
Those are really hard to gauge, especially the ones that are, and I'm sure you've seen this, Jared, where it's like a little bit like underneath the radar.
Oh yeah.
Like when somebody comes in and goes like, what are your pain points about podcast promotion? And you're like,
Why
okay.
why are you asking this?
Exactly.
Yeah.
It's like,
yeah, what service are you offering?
exactly. Yeah, totally. And so whenever we see those are really hard because I don't know. It's so hard to come up with that because it might be a genuine question, right?
Yeah.
But then usually it's not. For the 90% of the time, Those are leading questions for you to sell your own service.
They're deliberate. Yeah.
Yeah. And but it's very hard because there's no rule about that. You can't be coy. You can't be coy about your posts, right?
I'm going to make that rule.
I know, exactly. Say what
no
you
more,
mean.
no more coy.
No more coy. I know, that's so weird. But yeah, those are the hardest ones. And whenever you can't give deliberate feedback or something is not in those 9 things, that's when it's hard. I remember I actually approved a post because I read it really fast and it was not okay. I approved it and then I ended up like having to eat crow. And it was somebody who posted pet peeves. And it was something like, what do you hate about podcast? It was something like that. I'm exaggerating because I scanned it and I was like, I was like half asleep, because sometimes you just don't do your job. I didn't do my job. So I kind of scanned it and it said something about pet peeves and whatever. And it ended up being a post that was about, please tell me the things that you hate podcasters do on their podcast. I'll start. And then somebody was like, I hate it when this show does this thing. And then it became this like horrible, hateful post where people were just bitching, excuse my language. And I was like, and then my mods were like, this is not okay. Who approved this? Actually, I think it was Jess. I'm like, it was me. I'm so sorry. I messed up. You know what I mean? And so we ended up taking that post down because it wasn't in the spirit of our group. And
in fairness, you could not have guessed it was going to go in the direction that it went.
True.
So these things happen.
Yeah.
Yeah.
But it was like one of those things where we try to in our group, we try to frame things in a real positive way, right? There's no we don't really try to talk down to folks. We really don't disparage services or providers. We provide as much facts and experience as possible. And anytime anybody posts something, it's from their own experience, right? It's my experience when I've used this tool, it's worked really well. Or it's my experience that this has failed for me many times, or I'm not a fan of the color orange. I don't know. So therefore, I don't like that. That's my experience. And so it's less about this is the way you do things. And anytime we hear that, we try to really teach through example in how we post in there.
So the three things that you've kind of said from the front is the responsibility portion, the culture, and the investment. So let's. Yeah. Is there anything that you want to say that relates to the culture side of it? And if not, we can just kind of take the last couple of minutes here and do investment, and then maybe some Q&A.
That investment aspect of it is very important, and I think that's something that, at least for us, and has been huge because now we've invested in a team. You know what I mean? So now we have an investment of a team that helps us. We have a supportive team who posts in the group for us, who know and support our culture, and they know us very well. So they actually do the majority of that ongoing stuff that goes in there. They have invested in us because they really run our culture throughout social media, including the group, which actually, just to let you all know, if anybody wants to outsource this, it takes a lot of time and resources for them to be on it as well. We also have volunteer moderators that we implemented this year as well. All of them are podcast pros, and they are in there, and they also know us, and they know the type of culture we're putting together. We made sure that we had at least one person, God bless her, that is there, and she's Australian, so she's there in the nighttime. And then that's something different that I didn't even know, because there have been a couple of times when I've woken up to like a raging fire in the group, and it has destroyed my entire day.
Oh, no.
I know. And I'm like, oh my God. And so for my own mental health, now we meet. We have a Slack channel where we communicate things. If somebody has an issue with a post that they don't know what to do with, or if they want to flag Jess and I because there's a post that they want us to keep an eye on, it is all discussed inside of that Slack channel where they'll say like, I want you all to keep attention to this. And in all honesty, Jess and I are very little in that group now because we are taking care of the She Podcast Super Squad and we are doing stuff for that and we are planning for the other things. And so that group in itself doesn't have us in there as much. So that has been a huge change for us in terms of the investment. But one thing that I wanted to make sure that folks knew is that when it comes to that investment, you are going to have to pay for it. And when I say that is, I'm not saying it's just going to be money. I'm saying you're either going to have to pay with time, you're going to have to pay for resources that you build around it, or you're going to have to throw money at it. There's no way around it. And the more it grows, the more you have to invest in it. So that's been huge for me. And we've had to make decisions, particularly this year, to remove ourselves from it for our own well-being and add other people to take care of the things that we can no longer do anymore.
Yeah, that makes sense. And that's a good tie into the investment piece. Because you creating this other tier is an investment as well. So I get it. Part of the reason I get it though is I've kind of experienced what you're talking about for someone who's new and they're starting their podcast and they're like, okay, I want to grow my community. These are things that you get to look forward to. So maybe let's just touch on that. If you had to start tomorrow from scratch in a Facebook group, what are one or two things that you just really would keep in mind as you're setting that up, and hopefully this will feed the the new people who are saying, okay, I don't quite relate to this yet.
Yeah.
But if you started fresh tomorrow, what is one or two things
gracious.
that you keep in mind?
All right, yeah. One of the things, and this is going to be a very weird bit of advice, but to understand that you can't control Facebook. So you can't control Facebook's algorithm at all. And one of the key things that I would do from the get-go is that I didn't know then is that I would really connect a page to a group. Like the page in the group, like the posts that are coming from my page will have to lead every time it's going into the group, not my personal profile page, because then all the algorithm within Facebook will be attached to my page and it will not be happening with myself, because I find that right now that algorithm is so skewed towards the profile and the people that I'm linked to. And I think that folks that are starting out may or may not know this, but the amount of friends that I have on Facebook affects how many people see my post in the group.
Yeah.
And there's such a correlation between those two things that I wish I could remove that altogether and have started from the beginning using my page inside of my own group so that I could get that algorithm there. And I wouldn't have to, I don't know if you know that or you do this, Jared, but if I'm not friends with somebody, they don't see my posts in my own group.
Yeah.
And I don't want to be friends with over 20,000 people that I don't know.
I don't even think Facebook allows that. So you wouldn't be able to, even if you wanted it. So you're right. That's a really good point. So a Facebook page can be connected and linked to a Facebook group. And I think that's really good advice, Elsie, is considered when you're starting out, you're starting that new show and you're having a Facebook community, is having a Facebook page for your podcast and linking that to the group. And then consider some of your posts, maybe not all of them, but at least some of them being from that page to help kind of keep people connected on both of those. I like that. And I totally see how that would make sense as you scale.
I think that in terms of scaling, absolutely. Sorry, Jared.
No, go ahead.
The scaling aspect of it is really important too, because there might be a point where you do outsource some of this, and giving team access to your page is so much better than giving the team access to your profile, right? And that would be weird if people are posting as you versus posting as your page, because that's a brand. And so when it comes to scaling and thinking about the future, it works so much better, because security wise for yourself, for your own personal protection. And let's say you I don't know, people do this too. They sell their stuff, right? What if they sell their podcast? Then you can just sell the assets. You have nothing to do with it. So
Yeah.
there you have it.
No, that's good. But I did want to ask this for someone who's starting out. Okay, how much of because you could argue, and I don't want to get too heavy into this, but you could argue saying, "Oh, well, the page is, I want to join the group because I love Elsie. I don't know that I love the page. I love Elsie's page as much as I
Right.
love Elsie. I want to interact with Elsie. So, and again, I'm using your name, but this you can
Right.
insert podcast host name.
Mm-hmm.
So what what's that? Is there a balance there of saying, okay, I can use my page for the scalability for the long term, but also I need to be human and I need to be involved in the beginning at least.
Yep.
So what encouragement do you have there for
I would say
for
use it
balance?
Facebook Lives are great. That's what we've done. Like that's
Yeah.
something Jess and I did. Like we went
That's
in
good.
there and we did like a She Podcast history and culture video that is pinned to the top. Anytime that we have to say something, like we would just do that. We will go in there and do a Facebook Live. We would make sure that where they see us, we've done Q&As in there. We do that kind of stuff where it's like a personal kind of post outside and other places that we do that. And then we encourage people to join the Super Squad because the value add is that Super Squad. And if that's really what you want, you can connect with me like almost at a weekly basis. And we also have another value add, which is a texting platform that we use called Community. And so I will send text messages to the Super Squad members of stuff that's going on behind the scenes. Where I go like, look at this picture. Look at that. Like, it's totally me. It's me. I'm texting them and they're getting a text from me. And yes, it is a little markety, but not really. It's more about me sharing immediately with that specific small group. And that's another value add that we have.
This is really helpful. Elsie, I love the live thing that you said. I think that's a wonderful way in the beginning to be present, but not overextending yourself. I love that. Okay, so we only have a couple more minutes here. I'm sure there's going to be people that are going to have questions and we won't be able to get to them. So, Elsie, how can someone connect with you? Obviously, we know you have the She Podcast group, and you have just tell us the different places where people can be aware of what's going on and what you're up to.
Yeah, I usually stick to just my shows. So She Podcast, we record live every Monday. We might change it for the summer, but we generally record live. And we are live on Twitter and live on Facebook, and you can, you can subscribe to our show. The feed, the official Libsyn podcast, is also my other show. Comes out twice a month, and the majority of places that I am is really just Twitter here and there. I have been living by what I want to build personally, and so I keep the connections to me are things like this, where I do events or talks like this, and my podcast. Because otherwise than that, my bandwidth is a little, I had to make,
Absolutely. And that, rightfully so. And we look forward to the people who are watching this when they get to that level, because you can and you will, but it takes a little perseverance. But proud of you, Elsie, that you've not only gotten there, but the way you manage it is about as professional as I've seen anywhere.
Oh, you're so kind, Jared. Oh my God. Seriously, if you have any questions, you can, DM me over on Twitter. I'll send those out, or you can just email Elsie at libsyn.com or shepodcast.com, depending upon which brand you want to reach.
Well, I hope they will reach out. And Elsie, we really appreciate you. As we close out, do you have any final thoughts, any parting words of wisdom?
Oh my goodness. I think that part of it is that you really matter. That's one of the biggest things for me, is that you as a human you are very important, and that you need to be able to follow your own instincts around building communities and making sure that you are well taken care of about that. You will serve those around you if you take care of yourself. The minute that you're feeling a little off, you may not present the optimal thing for your community. And as we started, it's a responsibility. You're a leader. So you embody that by taking care of yourself. And with that same kind of grace, you offer that help to those around you.
Wow, well said. Elsie, thank you so much. Thank you to everyone for tuning in, and look forward to hopefully seeing you later in the year in person, potentially in Nashville or in Phoenix or Scottsdale or
That's right.
wherever we can make that happen. So.
Wherever. Yes.
All right. Thank you again, Elsie.
Thank you.
Thanks,
Bye.
everyone.